Who is the Good Samaritan? Who is the Good Samaritan, the Good Samaritan of the Bible? Recently, a young couple asked me a question that must have some interesting history behind it. It was during a chance encounter in the garden section of a big box store. They asked me, what would I do if someone challenged my faith with a tough question? Would I kick them out of my group? Wow. I explained how I really like questions. I welcome questions. And our conversation continued for some time. You see, I've spent much of my life answering questions about God, life, and the Bible. But sadly, many millennials feel pushed out of their Christian groups because they ask questions, challenging questions that are actually excellent questions. And because of that, some millennials are now looking for God in the wrong places. Think about this. Jesus welcomed sincere questions. Here's one. A Jewish lawyer asked him a question. Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? The Good Samaritan story was part of the answer Jesus gave to him. However, many people today misuse that story, particularly politicians on both sides of the immigration debate. They've got very different agendas, but they both use that story. But that lawyer in the Bible story asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He didn't ask, what must I do about immigration? It actually gets me up on my feet and pacing, and sometimes talking to the TV, when politicians force their opposite opinions into the Bible, trying to justify their agendas. They're trying to preach over Jesus' shoulder. I'll tell you, that really irritates me. So here's an overview of the actual Luke 10 Good Samaritan story. A Jewish lawyer put Jesus to the test by asking, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus answered his question with two questions. Jesus asked, what's the law of God say? And he asked, how does it read to you? The lawyer answered, knowledgeably, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Jesus responded to him, you've answered correctly. Do this and live. But wishing to justify himself, make excuses for himself, the lawyer said to Jesus, who's my neighbor? So Jesus told the Good Samaritan story. That's the context. Here it is. A man was going down the dangerous road from Jerusalem northeast to Jericho, and robbers attacked him, beat him, and left him half dead. When two other Jews, a Levitical priest and a layman, saw him, they passed by on the other side of the road. They went to the other side. But a Samaritan, despised by many Jews, a Samaritan came upon the man, and he felt sorry for him. He bandaged up his wounds, poured oil and wine on them, put him on his own animal, and took him to an inn, and he took care of him until the next day. Then he gave 2 days' pay to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I'll repay you. After telling that story, Jesus asked the lawyer, which of these three was a neighbor to the man who was robbed and beaten? The lawyer said, the one who showed mercy toward him. Then Jesus said to the lawyer, go and do the same. The Samaritan was a foreigner from the region north of Judea, from Samaria. He was traveling that road for business or personal reasons. We don't know which. And there was no mention of him fleeing his homeland, being a refugee, seeking asylum, or even just being poor. Actually, he had his own money to spend. But you see, he was merciful, and the Jewish priest and the layman were unmerciful to the beaten man. That beaten man was their neighbor by Jewish heritage, their fellow countryman. They wouldn't take care of their own. The merciful one was the foreigner traveling legally and at his own expense in Jewish Judea. There's no way that Good Samaritan story was about immigration or borders. It was about mercy. But you see, even more so, It was about the lawyer's failure to keep the law that he had quoted from Deuteronomy 6 and Leviticus 19, to love God and to love his neighbor. Remember the lawyer's original question? Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus' response was designed to show the lawyer that he wasn't keeping and couldn't keep the law in order to get eternal life. Actually, the Bible makes it clear that we cannot get right with God by doing good works, by keeping the law of God. The Phillips translation of Romans 3:20 makes that really clear. Listen to it. No man can justify himself before God by a perfect performance of the law's demands. Indeed, it is the straight edge of the law that shows us how crooked we are. Jesus was helping that lawyer realize that the law's straight edge was actually showing him how sinful he was. The law of God does not show us how to be saved. It shows us that we need to be saved. In a sense, it doesn't make us, it breaks us. Good works are important, but none of us can keep the full law of God. Good works are important, but they don't get us right with God. And honestly, there are times when you and I are a whole lot more like that priest and layman than we are like the Good Samaritan. We fall way short of being good. But the good news is in the next verses in Romans 3. That tells us that salvation comes from outside of the law of God, paid for by the death of Jesus on the cross, and given to those who have faith in him. Be a good Samaritan, but realize that salvation comes only through faith in the merciful one who laid down his life for us. How can you and I inherit eternal life? Through faith in Jesus Christ, not by our good works. I'm John Morris. I'll see you on the next Just a Question.